called herself Princess Amelia. She also has an account where she calls herself Queen, and she also has her main account. This lady got a hold of me after Natalie died, and then she had repeated situations where, although she had said she wanted to help me, and that was her intent and her purpose, turned out that that wasn't her intent or her purpose. Mostly it was just her complaining about her life sucking, which is pretty common this day and age. And calling me when she's suicidal. I tried to be a good friend when she was being suicidal. I tried to act her the way that, or to treat her the way that people are supposed to treat somebody who's suicidal. That actually worked quite well, actually. The problem is, I needed help, and people didn't treat me that way. Not her, not anybody. She's one of those people that, after years and years leading me on that she was going to help, never did. Now let's take a look at Sigi. Last night, he and I had a conversation, and I was letting him know, of course, that the evidence is more important than my life. This evidence can change the world. It can change not just things here in America, but also abroad. The reason for that is because these things are horrible. They are happening. They are happening here in the United States, and our government is trying to sell to the rest of the world that we're a little Miss Perfect, that we're the good princesses. No, this is the United States of America. We got no princes. We got no princesses. We got no place for them. We got no place in the United States for that kind of selfishness, for that kind of selfish mentality. We have enough of it. How many princesses does England have right now? 2, 3? We got more princesses than that here in the United States. Self-proclaimed princesses. Self-proclaimed queens. Us ladies gotta stick together. Cute. When I was trying to explain the importance of my evidence, how I need help getting it out there, and people are like, oh, you can put it in my garage. That isn't help. It's useless. Now, Sigi did say that he called up the American consulate to explain one of the situations because it is serious and could have potential repercussions worldwide. Now, with Sigi being able to see that for himself with his own two eyes, he's able to see the urgency of it. Yay. He also, I have to believe him, right? A lot of people made claims that they didn't back up. I just have to believe them. That's part of the importance of making the call with me. You have to make it with me. With me. Making me do it by myself or doing it by yourself is always going to result in you getting blown off. So it's probably a good idea to listen. And there's a lot of folks who their excuse for not trying is that it's not going to work. Nobody's going to listen. Well, did you try? So, with Sigi, I think he's seen enough to actually take it seriously. He told me last night that he's already started collecting it, and he asked me what I want done with the evidence if I die. I said, expose it. show it. Because of people trying to destroy my Facebook and all the evidence on it. Trying to destroy my YouTube and all the evidence on it. He's trying to download what he can just off the internet. There is so much more that's not on the internet. But the thing is, just the stuff on my just the stuff on my YouTube alone is enough to get many, many, many convictions. It's enough to put a stop to this. Matter of fact, there are so many people that would be arrested. They'll have to put a stay on those arrests. If they arrested all of the officers involved just in Dual County alone, they would have to disassemble at least 3 different police forces. Most of those officers were allowed to move on after committing felonies against me. Felonies, not misdemeanors. We're not just talking about looking the other way here, folks. We're talking about taking an active role and active involvement in threatening, harassing, and intimidating witnesses. And of course, destroying evidence through illegal means. Gaining access to that evidence through illegal means. See, although it is legal to obtain things through these means, it's illegal to do so in the way that they did. When you try to hand the police all the evidence that they need to convict your predators, and they refuse to take a look, and then lock you up over a crime that was literally never committed, well, I got problems, son. Sigi is the first person who's tried to take it seriously about the fact that my evidence is more important than my life. Absolutely it is. If I had a choice today between my evidence being seen or me living until tomorrow, getting the evidence seen is more important than me being alive tomorrow. Because without that evidence being seen, it's not a life. That evidence won't just change things for me, it'll change things for all of us. The evidence that the police were allowed to destroy because you guys didn't care when it made a difference. You just wanted to tell me how to think and how to feel. And then, of course, your own stuff is more important. Now, I can understand that your own stuff is more important, but if you don't speak up, I can't believe you were ever going to help me, because that's what I needed. For you to look, speak up. The situations you were there and a part of, I need you to actually speak up about. If these things actually happened, help me get those things into court. Don't tell me something that you're not going to try getting into court. Now, Sigi being in Germany and him, well, at this point, he's fighting more for our Constitution than any American is, other than myself. He's got a lot of people who had pretty notions and good ideas. You know, some of those ideas would have been great ideas if it weren't for my situation. A situation that they don't bother to become familiar with. I've been sending evidence to people for years who claimed that they were my friends, claiming that they wanted to help. Said, how can I help? How can I help? And I explained it to them. You can speak out. Oh, Sean, that won't work. Actually, that is the only thing that works. I mean, according to the way that our laws are written, yes, very specifically, I ask you to do what it is that the laws are written about. Very specifically, pointing out the laws themselves, recording the laws, posting the laws up for you guys to see, and go and argue. They'd rather argue than actually take a look at what the law says. They would rather argue than take a look at the evidence. They would rather assume someone's guilt or innocence based on gender, which I've been speaking out since the beginning. Last night I sent Sigi a whole lot more evidence from before Natalie was killed about how I did speak up about this. You know, with one of my YouTube videos, or one of my Facebook videos from before Natalie died, having 94,000 views. And of course, you can't tell that to anybody without access to the evidence to prove it, because some old dude who doesn't understand the impact of the internet, doesn't understand how easily that can make a person a target or get them killed. And you gotta try to explain to this old guy what 94,000 views on your channel after being accused of fucking killing somebody really means. But of course, that sounds like a fake number to somebody who doesn't understand it. And unfortunately, I got a retarded doctor from Germany who wanted to listen to my predators. On the bright side, none of the things that he did were legal, and none of the things that the police did was legal. There's also the fact that he couldn't make a diagnosis by his own admission, but they pushed him to do it anyway. They also, Mr. Starkey, the county attorney in Dual County, tried making the claim that several of the doctors from Lincoln Correctional Center were not qualified to make such decisions. And of course, those doctors were. See, although they couldn't get a doctor to say that I was schizophrenic, they certainly weren't going to allow a doctor to speak in court who said that I wasn't. They weren't going to allow Ted Hill to speak, or his boss. And his boss, as well as Dr. Sears, are definitely qualified. The same thing with Dr. Urata. No, ma'am. I'd like a large cup of coffee with 15 sugars and 15 creamers. Woohoo! Diabetes! I do it alone. Thank you. When your friends want to tell you to blow things off, or they want to blow you off and tell you to blow your problems off, they ain't your friends. When people care about you, they don't want you being hurt. But also, just because you love somebody doesn't mean that you owe it to them to take abuse. And there comes to a point, there's a lot of men I know who got to this point where you can't take the abuse anymore. You have to do something desperate. Thank you, ma'am. Are you new or just new to me? Maybe I should just pay better attention. Thank you, ma'am. Alright, so I'm gonna make a complaint here. I want to complain about the brown people and Tillamook treat me like a person. I want to complain that they talk to me like I'm a person. I want to complain because I like their accents, most of them. I want to complain because many of them speak languages that I don't understand, and it makes me jealous because I want to be able to speak those languages. I always wanted to be able to curse out a Russian sailor in Russian. Now, does that sound like an insane reason for wanting to learn a language? I also want to learn Spanish and Japanese. Konnichiwa. Ohio! That's one of the easiest Japanese words to remember is Ohio. Not only is it a state of the union, it also means good morning in Japanese. Ohio gozaimasu. Anyway, the point about Sigi Sunday, Sigi wants to call up and do an interview. He actually specifically created a channel day before yesterday. In Germany, they have to get approval before they can make a live channel, apparently, on YouTube. So he's gonna interview me today, and maybe he'll talk about some of the stuff that he's seen, because he's gotten to see a lot of it. But he wants me to get my story out there, and not the way that Jennifer Dujowski did, not the way that Mike Boudet did. Matter of fact, last night I was supposed to send him some stuff about Mike Boudet and Jennifer Dujowski, and I didn't. I had a bunch of other stuff to send too, though, and I did get stuff sent. There's just the sheer bulk of it all, and the fucked up situation I'm currently living in kind of make these things not user friendly. Also, Sigi felt the need several times yesterday to tell me he was being sarcastic when I knew he was being sarcastic. I like the guy. I don't like the misunderstandings. But I think that, the more I explain it and the more he does on his own, the more screwed up he's going to realize it is. Like after calling the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt, Germany, now he realizes, I'm sure, that he should have made the call with someone. That you're going to get blown off if it's just you. He was genuinely surprised at how they treated him. I'm not, though. As an American, I know Americans. Now, that doesn't mean that every single American tries to live up to your stereotypes, but, there are a lot of people in this country who do. I know a lot of American men that will not date an American woman. That's a form of nationalism. I don't mean nationalism as in pride. I mean nationalism as in, discrimination due to nation. Not necessarily geographic location at birth. We ain't nice to brown people. It's a very un-American thing to do. 1940s, we basically pushed Hispanic folks to join our military. We had a lot of Native Americans in the military too that fought World War II. After the war, it is estimated that up to 30% of Hispanic and Native American soldiers were deported to Mexico. That started in 1954 through 56 in Nebraska. Everybody remembers the military buses. The buses from the 1940s that were everywhere. They drove these soldiers home at the end of the war. They went and picked them up at the beginning. These buses drove them from wherever their mustering point is all the way to wherever they had to go to boot camp. These buses did everything, and there were thousands of them. And of course, after the war, wanted to figure out something to do with them. There's people in Big Springs, Nebraska, who still remember their friends who were brown-skinned being abducted while walking on the way to school. My grandma Bruns had a friend named Anita. What happened to Anita? Anita got deported in like 5th or 6th grade. Anita was born here in the United States. Her parents were born here in the United States. They were part of the United States in that area before it was ever a part of the United States. One thing most of y'all don't know. Everything west to Louisiana was either taken from the Spanish or taken from Mexico. See, the El Cazador sank in 1784. Now, because of the El Cazador sinking with 50,000 pieces of silver, they were supposed to shore up the economy at a place called New Orleans. Well, it sank. El Cazador means the hunter. And the hunter sank about 50 miles off the coast of New Orleans. Because of that, the Spanish could not shore up the economy and ultimately sold it to France. France, being as it was Napoleon Bonaparte, needed the money to finance and fight his war in Europe, so he sold us the Louisiana Purchase. Later on, we had the Mexican-American War, where we steamrolled a bunch of brown folks. And then, of course, we've got all these brown folks that we inherited who are already here. And then we want to tell them to go home. You people just need to go home. They were born here. Their grandparents were born here. Their great-grandparents were born here. They were a part of this nation before it was a part of this nation. That's right. Spaniards were in Oregon first. Spaniards were in Texas first. Spaniards were in California first. And when Mexico won its independence from Spain, well, those went from being Spanish citizens to being Mexican citizens to being American citizens, all over wars and sales, of course. Now, the Louisiana ones, those folks went from being Spanish to being French to being American. So, in about a 25 year period, the folks in Louisiana got to have 3 separate nationalities, plus, of course, the nationalities that were already here. The Europeans did not want to acknowledge. Did they acknowledge the Shoshone Nation as a nation? No, they didn't. When I say they as a whole, obviously we're talking about the governments and not individuals. Because individually, We had white people arrested in the 1950s in Nebraska because they didn't want their friends deported. We had people who served 20 to 30 year sentences because they stood in front of these buses. But then again, you see somebody standing in front of a tank in Tiananmen Square. That's a big thing. That's a very big thing. It was all over the news. That was the 80s, wasn't it? That's right. A lot of you just simply don't remember the 80s. You don't understand the repercussions of your decisions. Your parents never bothered to teach you. When it comes to the evidence, it is more important in my life. And I think Sigi finally gets that, finally understands that. Last night he tried explaining to me that he does understand it now. If something does happen to me, what should be done with the evidence? We use it to save people's lives. Rebecca Ann Grossnickel-Foley, her stories are still up and her evidence still up. Still needs to be heard, still needs to be seen. I fight hard for the other victims for a reason. I know what happens if you have to fight alone. You lose, and that's it. Especially as a broke folk. Especially as a homeless folk, especially as disabled folk. I believe in doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And although I don't always know what the right thing to do is, when it comes to preservation of human lives, I'm gonna do something. Anything that is done to draw attention to the issue at that point is better than doing nothing. If you had to light your own house on fire, literally light your own house on fire, in order to save somebody else's life, what's more important, that person's life or your house? If all our phones are dead, all I've got is a 5-story or 5-bedroom house out in the middle of the desert. Ain't nothing but sand out there. And I see myself an emergency helicopter that's close enough that if I was to light a fire, they would send somebody out there. If I see somebody coming my way, and they're going to die if I don't signal that helicopter, yeah, that house is fucking kindling. Now let's say it's not my house. Let's say it's your house. And let's say you're the idiot who injured that person who's gonna die. They're gonna die unless we figure out a way to signal that helicopter. Well, now you're, first of all, gonna be less inclined to burn your house down for a signal fire. You really don't want to get in trouble because your stupidity is going to lead to this person dying. And if they end up dead, well, dead men tell no tales. It's your word versus theirs. People are more important than things. But to most of you, there is only one person who is more important than things. That's inanimate objects, or objects that are only animated when you put them in motion. For most of you, your granny's brooch is worth how many lives? How about your great grandma's wedding ring? How many lives is that worth? And whose lives? I mean, sure, it's your neighbor's life. Shit, yeah, that wedding ring might be worth more. It might be worth more to you than your neighbor's life. But if you got to pawn that ring so that you can get your son another cancer treatment, or get your daughter another hop through the loop, I guess is what they call it. When you got leukemia and they got to replace all the blood in your body, or sickle cell anemia. But most of you are too self-centered to pay attention to the world around you. The only parts you care about is you get notices that men are evil every once in a while. All right, not every once in a while. You get that stuff every day, don't you? Many of the women I know have complained that they get on the internet, go to check their Facebook, and it's just a bunch of man bashing. So goes life. But that's important. It is important, especially in situations like mine and cases like mine. What's the mentality that we're actually having to deal with? Are we having to deal with people who are listening or people who are assuming? Many of the conversations that I had, you get to hear people later on when they want to be angry at me and throw me away and say, I never said that. And you never said that, Sean. And then I go back through and I listen. I posted up for everybody to hear. Yes, indeed. I told you multiple times you didn't hear me. Your ears were turned off. You used your selective hearing because I don't matter. Or if I was a pretty young woman who was short with a bunch of makeup caked on, wearing a mini skirt in a blizzard, you'd probably try listening then, which is weird to me. It's weird to me that I fight for a lot of people's rights because I believe in equality. And that ain't what we got, though. What we've got is man-hating, masquerading as feminist rights or equal rights. No, in reality, it's just shaming and blaming the victims. And the majority of the situations that I was there and present for when it came to physical violence between a man and a woman, most of the time women started it. And most of the time the man does not defend himself because he knows better. He already knows that although legally it's against the law for him to assault him, the reality is even the cops aren't going to follow the law. That's a pretty blonde-haired, blue-eyed white girl. People will get angry and throw tantrums if the outcome is not how feminists want to see it. Just like people will literally tear their own city to the ground if black people don't get what they want in a situation or trial. Is that true? No! There are very specific communities that did happen in. But even Rosewood wasn't a situation of racism. There's two stories in modern times that need to be compared. Not all of them took place in modern times. Let's take the story of Helen of Troy. When you really think about it, and you really look at caring about other human beings, Helen of Troy showed exactly what beautiful people do. We teach beautiful people that nobody else matters. For her, she was a Spartan. For her, tens of thousands of men killing themselves over her, it didn't matter. Hell, she knew there was going to be consequences before she ever left with Paris. Now, we do need to relegate that story to fantasy because it is so far removed from anything that we can actually prove. There's only a few things in the stories told that can be proved, and then there's stuff that makes no sense to us. By the way, Charybdis is a sea creature that supposedly exists in between Sicily and mainland Italy. Charybdis is supposed to be a ocean serpent that spins around in circles and swallows ships whole. In reality, it's about a 140-foot wide tidal wave, or tidal, what do they call that? Not a tidal wake, a tidal. It's the name for a sea cyclone when it does it underwater. Instead of being a tornado that goes into the air, it's a tornado into the water. It's I should know this word. I really should. Anyway, it sucks you down. There's a place called the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in Washington State. The Galloping Gertie or whatever. The bridge itself is still there, and they built a new bridge right next to it. Now, below it, you get to see two things that are pretty rare. Number one is a giant squid. Giant squid swim slightly up the river so that they can basically hang out over by the Galloping Gertie Bridge. I'm sure there was a point to that, and I was going to get to it, but it don't matter. What does matter is that you guys don't know a whole hell of a lot about yourselves, your bodies, your history. If a Native American tells you that there was no war here in America before Europeans showed up, there are those of you who are dumb enough to believe it. Now, there's a story told by one of my predators. His name's Derek Apodaca. Also goes by Thor. This guy's just a pervert. But he's also a Native American. He told me that the majority of the Southwest was created by his people. That they salted the ground and knocked everything down so that the Aztecs wouldn't want to come up north and mess with the people up here anymore. They wanted to live simple lives, and of course you've got the Aztecs sacrificing 20,000 people at a time. There's several outposts in Arizona. Arizona is one of these places that was supposedly salted. We've got evidence that it used to be a lot more lush than it is because there's nothing there now. What does it take to destroy a place to where there's absolutely nothing growing? Salt. Salt. Salt stops everything from growing. If you put an infant in salt, that infant will be dead in hours. Even though that salt is dry salt, it's going to start sucking and wicking the moisture away from that infant. And the human body is far more resilient to salts than any plant is. Our bodies require electrolytes such as salt so that we can actually transmit the electrical signals going through our body and telling our nervous system what it needs to do, telling our limbs where they need to move, where they need to go. And of course, the signal back is just important, isn't it? You cut your finger, it's probably a good idea to know that your finger is cut and do something about it before an infection gets in there. Bacteriophages, protozoans, radiolarians, anything of the flagella type is probably not good to have in your system. Flagella means tail, just so you know. Your little spermies have flagella. Flagella means it can swim. It means that it doesn't just auto-rotate. It doesn't just kind of float around and attach to whatever happens to come close to it. We got a long history of nastiness here in the United States. A lot of people want to do the whole pointing fingers at just whites, just white Europeans in specific. And then we want to blame people who were born here in America for the things that were done by immigrants. I'm not an immigrant. I was born in the United States. I am a Native American. I am not, however, an indigenous person. Most Australians in the cities are not indigenous people. They're descendants of Europeans. Now we get to see how most of this was started by the British Empire, who made it illegal to have slaves in Great Britain itself, but promoted slavery everywhere else, from Australia to Africa to the United States of America to their holdings in the Congo. There was not one single continent that Great Britain did not have slaves, and that held until after World War II. It wasn't until well after World War II that India finally got its independence. Same thing with Burma. After World War II, the British were still real heavily trying to keep, well, their holdings. It's the British holdings. Nearly all these places, their slaves were what? Were they white people like the Brits? No. It took World War II to show the British how evil their commonwealths really were. How evil it was to hold on to them the way that they did. Canada was primarily white folks, as far as they concerned. None of the Native Americans actually existed. Just so you know, the British broke more treaties with Native Americans than the United States government. So did the French. It wasn't just French or just British holdings after World War II. It was also French holdings. What was Vietnam before World War II? It was a French holding. How did we get involved in Vietnam? The French thought that they should be able to go back and do to the Vietnamese what they had just complained and gotten their ass whooped over. The French didn't want to be slaves, but they had no problems after the war going right back to enslaving people. going right back to murdering them wholesale so they could take resources from brown people. French got their asses kicked in Vietnam. Them brown people decided, you know what? We're not treated like citizens in our own country. We're treated like animals by people who don't belong here. The sad thing is, those folks would belong there if they could see the local population as human beings instead of property, instead of profit. Great Britain may have made slavery illegal on the island itself in 1066, which is also the first year that any monarch in Great Britain was coronated at Westminster Abbey. And every monarch since 1066 has been coronated at Westminster Abbey. And meanwhile, the most celebrated British monarchs, like Queen Elizabeth I, for example, were some of the most atrocious and horrible human beings to ever grace the face of the planet. Who started the slave trade from Africa to North America? That was Queen Elizabeth I and Sir Francis Drake. The very first shipment of African slaves to the United States was on board Sir Francis Drake's ship. Queen Elizabeth II already knew that was going to piss off the Spanish. That's why she did it. It's also the reason that the Spaniards called him a pirate. It wasn't what he did to the Spanish when he took over their ships. That's not what made them call him a pirate. They were calling him a pirate well before that, because he went and stole people from their homes in Africa, transported them across the sea, and forced them into manual labor for the British Crown on Spanish territory. That's right. Why did the Spanish send an armada? Was that before or after Sir Francis Drake? It was after the slave trade, because if you paid attention in history, you would know that Sir Francis Drake, during the Spanish Armada, led a fire ship into the Spanish Armada himself. The British want to see him as a hero for that. That happened because of Sir Francis Drake, specifically because of the trade of human beings from Africa. Not sure if most of y'all know this, but by that point in time, Spain had already made it illegal to own slaves. But their laws are similar to their laws of the time were similar to our anti-slavery law, the 13th Amendment. Does the 13th Amendment make slavery illegal? No, it doesn't. It makes it legal if you're convicted of a crime. Doesn't matter if you're guilty or not, that's incentive. Also, I'm not going to refer to Charles as a king. We'll stick with Prince Charles. He's not fit to be a king. And neither are any of you. That includes Princess Amidala. Yeah. you don't get why the evidence is important or why it's more important than my life, that's your fault for not taking a look. Good to be rid of you. Thanks for coming to visit. Stay out of trouble or don't get caught. Remember, you are your brother's keeper and no victim left behind.